Welcome to the Attract Your Ideal Clients podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs who sell their expertise, including trainers, consultants, and coaches looking for real-world, actionable marketing advice to help them identify their competitive strengths, find and fix the marketing bottlenecks that are holding them back, and confidently make the right marketing decisions for their unique business. In today's episode, we'll be exploring ways to use AI tools in the right ways, not as a replacement for human-to-human connection, but to help make selling your services more effective and efficient. Joining me today is Deborah Ellenberg from Sandler Training. Now, before we get started, if you've hit a plateau in your training, consulting, or coaching business, I want to invite you to visit marcusschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine-tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's marcusschaller.com/subscribe. So you and I have talked now a few times, and we've been chatting a little bit about what to talk about on the show, specifically around AI tools. And whoa, yes, this is like the topic, right? The AI, this and that. But specifically, what I found so interesting about this topic with having you on the show is really how it relates to marketing and selling, right? So this isn't, we're not talking about the latest cutting edge AI technology. No, we're just talking about what are the tools out there right now that people can use to make their lives a little easier, more effective, more efficient when it comes to marketing their training, consulting, or coaching business, selling, attracting their ideal clients. So just kind of setting the table there for everybody listening. But to start out, can you just give us a really quick intro on who you are, what you do?
Sure. I'm Deb Ellenberg. I work with Sandler. So with Sandler, we really talk about we help our clients with sales management, leadership development, and training. And so, conversations really start with what's that existing process or system that you have in place that's enabling you to, get where you want to be. I call it shrinking that gap. So it's again, from a tool perspective, because we're talking about some of the technology and the AI tools, what are the things that we can do, the tools that we can use that can make us more efficient, more effective, kind of in our day from a sales, a prospecting and marketing perspective that is going to enable us to talk to, our ideal clients. It's going to help us better understand what are the challenges they're facing and how we might be able to help them. So at the end of the day, sales and marketing, it's just having a conversation. So, I think we've talked about that before. It's just literally a conversation and can we help you?
That's it. Can we help? How many people can we help, right? How many people
Yeah,
can we help solve their problem? And that's where the
yeah.
scaling comes in. And it is a delicate balance because there is a conversation, which by its nature is a thing between two people or a group of people. And how can we use technology to help uh, complement that, not replace it,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Not necessarily. At least that's the philosophy that some people think, we're just going to basically, create deep fakes of ourselves and just pretend we're in a million places once. But to start out, like, AI, ChatGPT, like all these things have been bounced around for years, but especially ChatGPT. And, as far as my perspective, really the last 2 or 3 years is when it's hit now with ChatGPT. The kind of zeitgeist of normal people are dealing with this and talking about AI. Just to start out, let's start kind of more quick philosophy about this. Like, sometimes I'll see stuff on LinkedIn. Somebody will say, like, what ways do you use AI? It's like, well, AI is in everything, right? So, it's in your CRM. It's in, when I do recording the notes on a conversation in a meeting and it summarizes it. So we're all using AI in ways that we don't even necessarily know. But when you think
Right.
about AI, like, what is it that comes to mind specifically for you? Not even specific tools, but just like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think when I look at how I'm using it now, the AI note takers, and I know we're not getting into the specifics right now, but that has drastically reduced the time that I'm spending uh, to either take all that information that I've gathered and put it in my notes and identify what are these next steps, and then even communicate, uh, put it in my CRM and even communicate to the folks that I might be talking to. Um, and here's the summary of what we discussed. Here's those next steps, those action items. Where before those things would take me a while. You in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, 10 minutes. And an hour later, I'm trying to craft up this email that sounds professional. And so you can use these AI tools. You can use the note takers. You can use ChatGPT just to say, "Hey, here's my thoughts. Can you put this into something that summarizes the conversation that sounds professional and it's got action items and there's clarity." So even from a very simple, it's going to save me some time. It's going to pull out some of those specific notes that maybe if I've recorded them, I might have missed, or I'm just not processing as quickly. Even in terms of researching some of when I before I even go to a meeting with a prospect, researching the industry, researching what are some of the challenges that they might have, putting in ChatGPT, if I'm, this person in this role, what are some of those challenges, or what are some of the questions I might anticipate if, as we're having a conversation. So you can really add some context to um, ChatGPT that provides, when we always say better inputs, better outputs. So when you're putting in information and asking questions and then gathering information from the AI technology tools, you're going to get a lot of really helpful information that's going to make those conversations with prospects and clients that much richer.
It's funny too. We're talking about the note takers. And for as a specific example, right before we jumped on the podcast to record, I looked at my Fathom, right? I do the note taker. And last time we talked last week, we kind of recapped what we're going to talk about today. And there was something funny I want to share with you because it was like it I looked at the notes, and I think this is pertinent to what we're talking about because at this stage, right, we still need to bring our brain to this, right? It's like using your GPS, right? You know what it tries to drive you through a cornfield, right? And you have to be like, whoa, I don't think this, or trying to make you do a U-turn in the middle of a freeway. Like there's times you still have to override it. But it was funny
Right.
you and I were talking about the fact that my wife and I are buying a house, right? So one of the topics it says house purchase update, and then the last one, Marcus and wife excited about the new suburban home. And I'm sorry, I just thought that was the funniest thing because I'm looking at that going like, well, it's not untrue, right?
It
But
just summarized it.
it just summarized it, but it was funny because it's so on the nose. It's like, yes, we are very excited about our new suburban home, but it just shows how at this stage, like it's great at capturing maybe facts, right? This is what we spoke
Yeah.
of, right? Nuance is still something that takes our experience and our presence and things like that. But anyway, there was a little bit of a digression there, but I just thought it was really funny before we jumped on, and it gave me the opportunity to share that. So, but yeah, so using it for things like summarizing, using it for things like research, insights to be able to kind of dig into something that might not be obvious to you. Um,
Mhm.
you mentioned note takers, right? And you mentioned
Yeah.
ChatGPT, which everybody is familiar with. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specific tools, in addition to note takers, or if there's some more ways that you use that as well, if you want to dig into more specifics, and like kind of not even just what it lets you do, but like some of the problems it might solve. Because I think with AI tools, a lot of it sometimes is like, look at all this cool stuff you can do, right? But was it
Right.
something that needed to be done, right? So
Right.
like summarizing a call, that's like, oh, that's really cool. Like I didn't even know I needed that, and now that I have it, I can't live without it. But some stuff I see is
Right.
like, the AI image generator, like, Mermaid Jesus or whatever. Like I don't know if we really need
And
it.
then it's got six hands or
Yeah,
six
yeah,
fingers.
six fingers,
Yeah,
So just, in that context, like not just, hey, this is this cool tool, but like, hey, some of the problems, challenges that people have when they're trying to do their marketing and they're selling and they're overwhelmed with all these tasks. These are some of the tools that I've found to be helpful.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's start with the AI note takers. So I know there are a ton of AI note takers out there. The ones that I use and or are most familiar with are I would give four. Fathom, probably top of the list. Um, Plowed, uh, Plowed is Plaud. That's I use that one when I'm having more face-to-face meetings, and I can give you some examples on that one. Attention AI and Sybil are also two other note takers that, right now I probably top of the list. They tend to be a little bit more expensive. I don't use those two, but I hear some of the from the Sandler network. I know some of the Sandler Network folks, and we're international, are using some of those other tools. So I highlight those. But I would say, on a side note, if Fathom and Plowd got together, that would be the killer of all AI note takers. And I say that specifically because Fathom is used for virtual meetings, whether you're having, a Zoom, whether you're doing, any of the other, teams, Fathom can be used. Um, Fathom cannot be used when you're having in-person meetings. And even a non-sales example. So I'm on the board of my condo community. I'm the secretary, and we just had our annual meeting in November and mid-November, and I used my Plowd to record the 2 hour meeting. So while I was still taking notes, I had my Plowd, and I wasn't sure how it was going to, how it was going to work because people, a lot of people in the room, big room set up. But it was wonderful. It captured stuff that I missed. I was able to go through it. And while it still took me a little bit of time to put together the minutes, it made it so much easier. So Plowd is a tool that you can use when you're having more face-to-face interactions. Um, anyway, but like I said, if the two of those two get together and they can do one, and I hear, there's word on the street that they are in conversations. So
Really, to have little note taker babies and that
no
like,
taker
yes,
babies
note
that do
taker
it all.
babies.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I think I might have asked you this a couple of weeks ago or when we first met. And I do a lot of audio notes for myself, right? So I
Yep.
use Zoho, just free,
Yep.
whatever. I make an audio note and then I'll go back through it once a day and clean it up, excuse me, organize my thoughts. But I'm like, I could take it and I can dump it into a transcription, whatever. But it would be really cool just to be able to go beep, beep, beep. Here's my thoughts, and then it just spits out what I was thinking, but more coherently than I stated it. Right. So it seems like that. You said Cloud, or is it Cloud?
Cloud
Yeah.
and Fathom. They both do
Yeah.
that. So they'll both transcribe,
Yeah.
capture that whole transcription. So you can go back and listen to the recording, but then they both provide a summary, which also then creates, kind of the takeaways and the action items, which to your point, summarizes things so beautifully that it's like, oh, I couldn't have done that myself, or I could have done it ourselves, but it might have taken us a little
An
bit of
extra
time.
hour,
So,
right? And especially if you
right,
get done with, let's say you're on a client call or a prospect call, right? Whatever it is.
right.
Uh, and yes, it's capturing what you talked about, which is by itself hugely valuable. But how many times do you get off of one of these calls and you have like, so next time, it's your own private thoughts. Yeah, so next time, or one thing I just thought of might be a good thing. Like, there's so many other little things that will pop into our head after a conversation about, oh, this would be a great thing to send them, whatever,
Right.
right? And to be able to capture that, and I'm sure very, very soon, all this stuff is going to not only get captured, but then organized very easily and efficiently into task lists. And it's going to be nuts, right? But to be able to do that
Right.
and then allows us to focus on the person, allows us to focus on the conversation.
Correct. Correct. Because you can take notes, but I don't have to be feverishly taking notes.
Yeah.
And I will say then, those that yeah, that domino effect, that ripple effect that happens that again makes us more efficient and effective in our meetings. And you might be hearing my dog in the background. She's chiming in. So,
Mine
but
was just
it's,
chewing on something a minute ago, so you probably heard her.
I didn't, but I think what it enables us to do then, once the meeting is over, A, it's putting it into the CRM that it's instantaneous. It's it's enabling us to come back and then reflect and even add to, what are the things that did it capture everything? Oh, I missed that. Or yes, it did. And it might trigger even another idea. It then, from a second point, it enables us to share that summary of minutes, that summary of action items to the folks that we're talking to or having that discussion with. Um, which people always say, oh my gosh, this is hugely helpful, hugely beneficial. From a third point, I think when we have continued conversations with the folks that we're, talking with, meeting with, learning about, gathering information, but it enables us to, before the next conversation, to say, oh, let me listen, let me reflect, let me read. And so I'm better prepared for this next conversation. Do we have a clear future? What is that clear future? It's not just, oh, I'll follow up with you next week. It's something that's very specific. And when we talk next Friday at 2 o'clock, we're going to talk about A, B, and C. And I'll have this information or you'll have that information. So, our expectation for that next meeting is this, and here's our desired outcome, from that meeting. But it just makes us so much more effective, and it level sets all the expectations that if they're not there, you're going to find out when you go back and reflect. Um, but it gets everybody on the same page.
Yeah, a couple of points that I want to highlight there too, about feverishly taking notes, right? And ultimately, we're trying to capture the important points from a conversation. And a certain amount of note taking can be beneficial. It demonstrates that you're listening. There's a certain kind of heuristic to it, I guess, that people when they see you taking notes, they go, "Okay, this person's really focused on me." And that's nice. But it can also pull us away from paying attention. Like we're writing the last thing and they're already saying something else. We're not listening to it at all.
Correct.
So the other thing is, I wanted to mention the sharing with people thing. I've seen it now from both sides, both me sharing it with somebody and being the one that receives it. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of thoughts to provide context for people listening on when it might really be helpful and when it might actually not be. And this is just my
Yeah.
opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I'll give you an idea, an example. I have been the recipient of coaching calls, or I've been the coachee, right? Where the coach has sent me the summary as is. Now, on that was that conversation's versions of Marcus and his wife are excited about their new suburban home. Like it took something, it wasn't not true, but it
Right.
lacked a lot of the context. So it might have been, let's say we're talking about this specifically, this is where I think it really didn't, I don't think it was effective in that use, where we had talked about things that might be next steps. Okay, so what could you do? Well, we might because it's a conversation. The
Yeah.
AI interpreted that as here's your next steps. Well, I never agreed to any of that. So it's not like here's Marcus's homework for next session. So I think when it's just sent as is, I,
Right.
I think I think it does us a disservice because it takes something that's very personal and now drills it down to be automated spitting out without taking a moment to look at it. I think it can make you look a little bad in that context. So
Yeah.
use it and go, okay, where do we leave off? And then do a little light editing, send it as a nice personalized email instead of just saying, here's the thing.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of that is I've been the coach in conversations where really it was just we're getting in the weeds about specific marketing or branding or messaging details. And the client was like, yes, can you please just send me the recording? And yes, that includes the summary, but they're not using it. I'm not using it as next step homework for them, if that
Right.
makes sense. So I just want to kind of bring that up. When you're in a sales conversation with somebody and you send somebody that summary, is it going to really accurately reflect the spirit of the conversation? And I just want to hear your thoughts on if you've experienced that.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up 2 points that really hit me. And it's really being mindful on, does it, when you read and reflect and you look at the the summary, does it really reflect what was said um and are edits required? And sometimes they are. So just sending it out as is may not be the best thing. So it's being mindful of, the intent of the information that's captured and then what's going to be shared, and how that might come across. And I think even before that, though, it's really making sure that we're asking for permission to, hey, is it okay? Even before that, when that meeting is set up, hey, I often use my Fathom note taker. Are you comfortable with that? And this is why I often use it, you know, but I want to give you a heads up. If you're not comfortable, please let me know and I won't use it. And so you want to get somebody's permission that if we're going to use it, that they're okay with that. I've had lots of conversations with folks that are in, wealth management or in insurance, and there are things that, they just can't be. It's not acceptable to be recorded. So, and I totally get that, and I appreciate that. So, asking for permission, but then reviewing it at the end before you just send it out, um, is I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I recommend, because it can be misinterpreted, or it could be like, well, yeah, you like your point, we captured it, but
Mm. I think the key there that you really nailed on is the intent and how it comes across, right?
yeah,
And so every type of conversation might be different. We have certain types of conversation, right? For example, when I speak to somebody I've never met before about possibly coming on the podcast, I will record it. Excuse me. At the beginning, I didn't just automatically do it because I was still getting used to it. And I've noticed that nobody's really been like, "Hey, you're recording this," because every time I go on something, my little thing showing that it's somebody else's note takers trying to get. I think people are
right,
used to it at this point. That said, if I'm going into a conversation with somebody as potential coaching client, or we're going to talk about stuff that's personal. I never assume, right? So it's like we're talking about
yeah,
stuff that's like they don't necessarily want it recorded. And usually what I'll do is like when we start getting into the meat of something, then I'll be like, "Hey, do you mind if I just hit my note taker? Because that way if it captures anything." And they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, whatever." Right? So ultimately, whatever the tools are, and this could be applied to if you're sending emails using ChatGPT created content, if somebody's getting the impression that you're just not paying any attention to their feelings or who they are as people, you've lost. You've just
right,
lost, right? And it
yeah,
doesn't matter how many emails you're able to spit out in an hour. If people feel like this is just has nothing to do with them and you don't even care, you've now, in my opinion, ruined the entire purpose of having this technology. So I
yeah,
think as a philosophy, when we think about these tools, how to use them, when to use them, why to use them, I personally feel is the most important question. And then okay, it's the right time, the right way, the right context. Okay, cool. Look at this tool, right?
right. Hey, no, I agree with you 100% on that one.
So, what are some other tools that we talked about the note taker, which I feel like really is just one of the most important ones that I use.
Yeah.
We could talk about ChatGPT about if you like to. Are there any kind of unique ways or special ways you're using that?
Yeah, well, that would be the other one. Well, I would talk about, those AI tools that really help you from a researching perspective, from even just how I might spend several minutes or even hours, trying to craft, a post or craft a response or craft an email that, the words just aren't quite coming to me. So I can take what I have and I can put it into Chat GPT, and give it some prompts, give it some context, say, this is what I'm looking for, act as if, this is who I'm writing it to, this is their industry, give it some context, how would you rewrite this um, to sound more professional, still create some clarity, and it will kind of put out then kind of a response, which I can again, I can edit or tweak just a little bit, but it really is helpful in terms of, you know, kind of how I might, how I might respond. That instead of spending a lot of time on it because the words just quite aren't coming to me, that I can put something into ChatGPT and Copilot, Gemini. Those are the other two. But I use ChatGPT on a pretty regular basis. But even in terms of how I might use it for understanding the industry. Give me more information about the industry. I'm giving, help me with information on how I might better relate to this person. This is their, if I'm not uh, quite sure on their disc style, these are some prompts that I would put in. What might be the best response, or what might be questions to ask, for this person, so I can gather more information and understand, does it make sense, how we might be able to help them. So it really provides a lot of information from a research perspective, a communication perspective, understanding disc styles, even understanding the industry, the competitors, what makes that industry so challenging. Again, coming back to the products or services that we provide and how we might be able to help our clients. But knowing more about them is going to be, hugely beneficial. And so the more prepared we are when we go into a meeting, the better we are in having those conversations to seek to understand.
Yeah, because you go into even before you've even reached out to somebody, understanding the problem that you might be able to solve for them or multiple problems. And what you just said about looking up industries, there's certain industry trends or certain kind of dynamics that are happening that can affect a particular company or affect a particular person within a company. And I haven't done this yet, but I imagine there's probably some ways to kind of more efficiently research a particular company too, right? It might not be
Mhm.
100% accurate, which is always the asterisk to all
Yes.
of this, right? Is it
Right,
might
right,
not
right.
be actually accurate, which is a problem. But that too, because what we're, people listening, when thinking about like you're a trainer, you're a coach, you're a consultant, not I don't know how many people think in terms of trigger events, but in the world of sales or corporate sales, you have these trigger events, right? That are like, hey, I just found out that this company is just blah, this happened, right? Now all of a sudden there's a
Right,
problem that you're aware of. Most trigger events are not public. There's
right.
probably a million trigger events, but we never know about them, unfortunately. So just having that, let's say you're focused on a particular industry or vertical, and you could be like, constantly monitoring that and seeing what's happening for people or particular companies who are trying to break into. Hey, there's 10 these huge enterprises that I'd love to break in from an L&D perspective and start doing training. Like that could be huge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a great amount of information that, again, it's coming into um, kind of using the tool and putting in the prompts that really provide uh, the great information that is helpful. So it's giving it some context. This is who I'm reaching for, looking into. This is who I'm, the information and the challenges that I'm, hoping to learn. This is what a day in the life looks like. Help me provide a little bit more content so I can go in and arm myself with information so I'm better prepared for the meeting.
Yeah, and all these use cases we're talking about, like the Fathom is a great example. ChatGPT is kind of like a broad, it's like I don't want to say a hammer, that's the wrong analogy, but it's like a very broad tool. You can use it for a lot of different things, and you have to be kind of creative in how to use it to get good output, right?
Right.
And then there's things like Fathom that you don't have to know anything. You just hit the button, right? And it just does
Right.
it. And you could mix it, you can mess with it, I'm sure, and change your settings. So, when right now we're talking about prompts, right? 5 years, somebody listening to this is probably going to, what are they talking about prompts? I don't, prompting what? It's going to be probably a lot of these very specific use bundles. It's going to be like, hey, you're a salesperson. Here's some seven little tools you can use. You could set up a monitoring thing. It's the prompt is already in there and it's just spitting out updates. Like all this stuff is going to become so seamless, more
Right.
than it already has. And right now, at this stage, is when we really benefit from using more of the creativity because we have to kind of think like, "Ooh, what other ways can I use that?" But that will shift because there was how many thousands of AI-driven ChatGPT companies now, right? It's just like you can't even keep up with it.
Right, right. Well, and knowing that, while we might be meeting with them to gather information about us, the prospects and the people that we're meeting are also doing the same thing. I mean, prospects are more informed right now. They've got these tools at their hands, so they're going to do the same thing that we are, to learn a little bit more about us and what we're selling, or how we might be able to better help them. But they're going to equally do some research, and these tools enable them to gather information as well.
Which is a whole another can of worms because now we're talking about reputation management, what used to just be based on Google searches. That's going to be really interesting, right? Like, where is it pulling from? Is it true? Is it confusing you, Deb, with some other Deb, you who you might not want to be confused with, right? You know,
Right.
so all sorts of weird stuff can happen. Hopefully, we just use our best judgment as we use these tools, right? Um, so as we start to wrap up, I had mentioned before about, the using the note takers and just being mindful of a couple of, details and how we use it. What are some, if any, things that you've noticed that are like, yeah, I've been the recipient of this stuff, or I've seen stuff that you can see obviously is built by ChatGPT or written by ChatGPT. Like any kind of things that you would suggest people either be very, very careful about or just avoid altogether.
Yeah, well, I see it sometimes on social media where, some of the posts that I'm reading, I'm like, did you write this? Or is this generated completely by AI? And so I think you do have to have the human side of it, that I would be concerned if everything that you're putting into, something like ChatGPT, and then it's spitting out, that you just take it verbatim, and um, you don't look over it and maybe make some edits or tweaks, because you want to put your own personal style to it. So that's the first thing I would caution people. Whatever is generated, you don't just want to, okay, put this out there. I think what it does, it helps us create some ideas. It helps us streamline some of our thoughts. But I don't think that it's not gonna replace us. We don't want it to replace us. So you really still have to look over those things, and give it a once over. And just look at the images. Do they have six fingers? Does it, is it really what you wanted to put out there? I think that's the the big aha, the takeaway that I have, because it's personal and personalized. And so it's how we do those things that enables us to be our authentic self. I don't want something that's, oh, this is AI replaced. This is AI Deb. I want to, I still want to be authentic. And so if I can use some of these tools to make my life easier, more effective, really be a better listener, awesome. But it's not going to replace me.
Yeah, and I want to add a couple of thoughts to that too, specifically for my audience. If you think about trainers, consultants, coaches, the content side of things, right? Not necessarily the emails, although yes, definitely when you're communicating with people, right? But I'm specifically talking about content. The value of content in that space, you're an expert, you're selling your expertise, right?
Yeah.
If you're going on ChatGPT and basically saying just, a prompt that you're just going to do a listicle of stuff that people could Google, you're missing the point,
Right.
right? Because ultimately, and this is something that I've like, if I do have a t-shirt line, this is gonna be one of my t-shirts. It's gonna say, nobody needs more content, right? That's like the one thing. No, there is no shortage of content. Nobody is going at home going, I wish there was more content for me to consume. What is lacking, what is valuable, what is rare is deep insights, solutions, aha moments for specific people in specific situations, right? So when I saw this recently, on a platform for freelancers, and he was using an example of his profile as a freelancer, and it said, if I use ChatGPT to write blogs, you're never going to catch up with me because by the time you've written 30 blogs, I've written 300. I'm like, stop, just stop, right? Because people are watching that or looking at that. They don't understand that's a totally different use. They're
Right.
talking about, first of all, it's not going to be effective because they're just putting out junk and it's not going to be something that Google tracks in SEO and you're not going to get traffic from that.
Right.
But you're done get damage your brand, your business brand, because you're just putting out generic stuff. So I
Right.
just want to have a little, I wanted to add my personal tangent to that because it really is a thing where there's so much noise about, oh my, look how much content you create. Look how many LinkedIn posts. Yeah, but to what end? Whether it's
Right.
authentic or not, you're just putting out generic stuff. Like there's enough leadership coaches out there, right? We don't
Right.
need another. We need somebody with your insights and your experience to share your experience and insights in ways that other people can't. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would add too that, exactly with what you're saying, it's really sometimes it's more about it's quality versus quantity. Yes, we do want to, share information and put out information, but it's information that's valuable and relevant to others. So if you're just putting out information to put out information, here's a selfie. Hey, this is where I am. I think we're losing the point, especially when you're looking at, social media where people might see you. That doesn't provide value to anybody. That just says, you're out there. Great. Hey, thumbs up. So it really, you take a step back to say, what's the information that I'm sharing? Is it meaningful? Is it valuable? Is it relevant to others? And if I can't say yes to all three of those, maybe I shouldn't put that out there.
Special thanks to Deborah for sharing her insights on using AI in a way that enhances efficiency without losing the human touch. If you've enjoyed the show, I hope you'll consider subscribing and leaving a review. And don't forget to visit marcuschaller.com/subscribe for weekly troubleshooting guides and tips to help you find and fix the weak spots in your marketing that are holding you back, fine tune your positioning and marketing strategy, and start growing again by attracting more of your ideal clients. Again, that's MarcusSchaller.com/subscribe.